reason why I always got beat so fucking bad by my opponent, meaning addiction or alcoholism, is because I never gave it the time, attention, or respect it deserved. Right? I always underestimated the opponent that I was up against. And then I started surrounding myself with like really intelligent people who truly had my best interest at heart. And they said, don't you fucking know you've been fighting a fixed fight your whole life? You will never win that fight. And the only time that we win this fight is when we admit complete defeat. And the moment I admitted complete defeat was the exact second I secured the ultimate victory.
Welcome, everybody. Today's guest is known by many of you, I'm sure, but likely for many different reasons. Some of you will remember him as a 14-year-old prodigy who burst into the world of professional skateboarding and rolled with the legends. Some of you may remember him as a cast member on movies, TV shows like Jackass and Viva La Bam. And some of you likely know of his very public struggles with addiction that were so consuming that at one point his own mother had bought him a cemetery plot because she was painfully convinced that she was going to get that call. And through it all, up to today, he's built a home. Not just one home, but 6 homes where other struggling humans can go to find their redemption from their addiction. This man is Brandon Novak. Brandon, welcome to Gurus and Game Changers, buddy.
Whew, okay. That was very, very kind and really endearing. And to say that I'm grateful is an understatement. You know, and I'm really happy to be here today. And more importantly, I look for any reason to make it back to Westchester. It's a very nostalgic area for me. It's some of the best times of my life by far took place in this town. Some of the worst times of my life took place in this. I had my last drink literally before I got sober right up here at the corner and passing it coming here. You know, it took me back to that day. Westchester was home for so long.
Yeah, we love it. We love it. I want to reel it back, though.
Yeah.
I want to reel it back to when you were 7 years old.
Yeah.
And you got that first skateboard. And you slept with it that night, according to everything I've seen.
I truly believe that every one of us are blessed with a God-given talent, wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, I believe a lot of people don't, find what that talent is. Like, you could be the best ping pong player in the world, but God might not see fit to put a paddle in your hand. For me, at 7, my mother had given me a skateboard. And that night when she put me to bed, and I had no previous introduction to skateboarding, right? I had never seen it on TV. I had never saw it in a magazine. A neighbor wasn't doing it. Nothing that made me want to aspire or even think of it. Really nothing at all. And it was magical. And to this day, at 45, I can recall that night, the feeling I had when talk about euphoric. It was better than any high I'd ever, encountered later on in life. And it's funny thinking about it now and talking out loud. I always say that skateboarding did for me at a very young age what drugs and alcohol did for me at a later age, right? Like you give me that skateboard at the age of 7 and you put me in a room with the world's prettiest models. I'll not only believe that they've been waiting for me, but that they're dying to marry me, right? But then fast forward later on, I don't know what the fuck you're laughing at.
That's confidence.
That's not a joke.
I love that.
I think it's phenomenal.
I'm just kidding.
Love that. I love that.
But later on down the road, drugs and alcohol would produce that same delusional narrative, that I really bought into. So it was something magical the moment that board touched my hand, and I knew that like this is what I was going to spend the rest of my life doing. And it's so hard to stay on one topic without taking it to others, but skateboarding raised me. It was and even in today's society, it's guided me and held me and created me to be a successful man by the ethics and the morals and the values that I have that are a direct connection to skateboarding at 7. And it's the glue that holds everything together, literally. And
so how did Tony Hawk find you?
being from Baltimore, Baltimore isn't known as like, there's states and countries that are known to be like the mecca for skateboarding, and Baltimore isn't one of those.
Right.
But one of the best skateboarders to date came out of Baltimore, and his name was Bucky Lasik. And he rode for Pal, and obviously I was a kid coming up in that world, and that had became my thing to just literally fixate, eat, breathe, and sleep skateboarding. So I knew who was good and and I had recognized who Bucky was, and I dressed like him, I acted like him, I skated like him, and he took me under his wing because he saw the potential that I had. And he originally got me sponsored by Pal Peralta, who then is who Tony Hawk rode for. Mm-hmm. And I then started going out to California with Bucky, and we'd stay at Tony Hawk's house, and that was my introduction into that whole world.
Wow. But you were really young, right, compared to everyone else you were skateboarding with?
Yeah.
Is that how you first found the drug scene, or what happened?
The drug scene was introduced to me by my father. My mother was, she is everything to me, and if I could be a quarter of who she is as a human being, I've arrived in this world. And
love your relationship with your mom.
Totally. And I had a father who was around just enough to let us know that he wasn't around. Mm-hmm. And he was an addict. Mm-hmm. His father was an addict. So I firmly believe that I was genetically predisposed. Mm-hmm. My mother was not. My brother and sister, who are both by a different man, are not. Mm-hmm. Right? It's just me and my lineage. Right. But he was selling drugs, and he ran with the Hells Angels, mm-hmm. and he spent a lot of his time incarcerated. And, so I was almost unbeknownst to being groomed to become that. Yeah. It was just kind of happening. He would take me with him when he would go to conduct his business. Sometimes at strip joints, he'd be in the back, and they'd put me at the bar, and the pretty dancing girls would sit me, in these chairs and pour shots of ginger ale and Coca-Cola into the shot glasses. So I was like being groomed,
indoctrinated into the world, whether you knew it or not.
Yeah, yeah. And my father would give me that look of approval, and the girls would applaud, and all unbeknownst
it's part
to
of who you were as a
for
kid.
Sure,
growing up.
It was the norm, and my father kind of sold a lot of drugs. And later on in life, we did not have that father-son dynamic. It was really just a toxic, drug-fueled relationship where we sold drugs together, we did drugs together, we fist-fought in the street on many nights. We, called the police on each other. It was just a really toxic thing. And ultimately, he had overdosed and died as a direct result of his addiction to crack cocaine.
Right. Wow. How long ago was that? A long time.
Yeah. I was maybe 20s, mid-20s.
Oh, you were still young, really young. Okay.
For sure.
But so that was happening, and then you were also on the scene in the skateboarding world. So, because I know that Tony Hawk at one point tried to throw you a lifeline.
Well, it was just ironic that I would witness my father go through this and the mayhem and confusion and chaos he would cause at home. While my mother, early on in life, she had got a job drawing blood for Mercy Hospital for $5 a piece. She would go on these blood runs. She would draw the blood and take them into Mercy. And she was 17 years old at that point. She literally had worked her way up the ladder to become a nuclear physicist on the board of Mercy Hospital. And not so long ago, recently retired after 53 years of gainful employment. Right? She was the second longest employer of Mercy Hospital history.
Years.
And so she was working her way up the ladder to become that executive, that boss,
all that time.
And to be able to provide financially for a family of three, because my father was not helping or giving, he was taking and hurting. Mm-hmm. So seeing that and recognizing the traumatic stuff he was creating within our family unit, I actually excelled at everything I did to prove why I would never become that man from a young age. Later to just realize I became him times 10.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
But that's what fed your skateboarding. Not only the passion and love, but a proof. I need to prove
for sure. Yeah. So skateboarding raised me. My mother would, because leaving me at home with my father, his behavior was very erratic and sporadic, to say the least. Like anything could happen at any time. So recognizing that, my mother would take me with her. I'd go on those blood runs. She'd go into the hospital. I'd literally skate in the parking garage all day and just roam around. So I have a very special place in my heart for healthcare workers and hospitals, because I was literally raised by all of them.
Yeah.
And skateboarding was like my outlet. It was my safety. It was my comfort, and it was my also escape from that home life.
Sure.
And at the time, I thought that it was a very sick, toxic place, and how dare my father, and how could he? But after, doing a lot of work on myself internally and embarking on this spiritual journey, I've come to understand that not only do I accept him for who he was, I love him for who he was. And he was, just as we all are, a sick man who exposed his sickness in different ways.
Yeah.
Doing the best that he could with what he had.
Doing the best he could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're all just human beings. We're not human doings. This thing called life does not come with an instruction manual. And you read this, you get this, and you become that. Like, fuck.
We're just trying to figure it out.
That's it,
And you're going to
man.
make mistakes, and some of them are pretty intense
Totally.
mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I just remember there was a story that you told where he noticed that you were, doing heroin, and he tried to get you to stop.
My behavior started to shift. They started to change. I became kind of unreliable. The same behavior as my father, right?
Right.
Sure.
Sporadic and erratic. And of course, the people that loved me, reached out and were like, where are you? What's going on? Why are you not being productive? Why are you not a part of the scene? Why are you no longer doing what you love to do? And, and as they questioned my behaviors, I redact it and just kind of like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to be a part of this. When ultimately, in life, everything I've learned is just kind of in retrospect. Right. And I had no idea what was happening then. Today, it's very clear for me to see that my disease was just progressing and manifesting in areas that I was just ignorant to. I was ignorant to.
And you were, I don't want to say it was an ultimatum, but maybe it was, right? An ultimatum, either you get clean or you get help, I should say, or you leave the team.
Yeah. My first of like many, many ultimatums.
Oh,
yeah.
Got it.
That was that became like the par for the course kind of deal.
Do they work? Did they ultimately?
They don't work until they work.
Okay.
But that's the difficulty. That this thing does not come with an instruction manual, especially with recovery and more so addiction. Right? Like what worked for me may very well not work for you and you.
Right.
But I believe timing and alignment is everything, and it did not work until it worked. And then looking back, because perspective is everything, right? So at my first attempt, going into my first facility, that I thought was a fucking utter failure and waste of time, had by all, right? Because I only went there to prove why I didn't belong or need to be there.
Sure, of course.
And got loaded literally the moment I left there. I thought was like just a waste. Yeah. But looking back, what I learned is I had one of my most profound experiences at that first attempt that I didn't recognize till years and years later.
What was that?
So I was in this facility and I went in there with a closed mind and a closed heart to prove a point why I didn't belong. That all of you that loved me were merely overreacting at best.
Like, I got this.
Come on.
I'm okay.
You just caught me at a bad time on a bad way in a bad day. Tomorrow will be different. So I went into this facility to prove a point why I wasn't any of you. I didn't belong. After all, you people were my father. I couldn't fucking stand you.
Wow.
When I looked at you, that's what I saw. The guy who I tried to escape from the majority of my life. I'm 17 years old. I'm in Baltimore City, where I am born and raised. And I was given that first ultimatum. You go to treatment, you save your life, continue to skate with power, or you have to leave the team. And abruptly I quit. Yeah. And what's funny, looking back, the disconnection from reality that had already taken place. The abnormal had become the normal, and I had no fucking idea. And I haven't even had the pleasure of entering my first treatment center yet to start to acquire some knowledge or gain an understanding of what the reality of my current situation looks like. Right? Like, I'm just ignorant. And I'm like, so... and that's really profound if you think about that, which means that I have like a long life to live that's full of pain and anguish, aka addiction. Right. But I go in there focusing, only on why I don't belong, the differences, not the similarities, closed mind, closed heart, not willing to acquire any information or knowledge. And they take me into this room, and this room's completely empty, and they have me sit there, and the woman leaves, and out of nowhere, this older black gentleman walks in, and the room's completely empty, and he walks directly up to me, and he says, "White boy, what are you doing here?" And I say, "Heroin." He said, "How old are you?" I said, 17. He said, "Do yourself a favor and don't turn 18 in a place like this." And as quick as he came, he left. At the time, he or I had no idea the significance that simple conversation was ever going to have in my life. What I can tell you about that man is where the 4 teeth were placed in his mouth, right? Because at the time I had all mine, right? Comparing out, proving a point why I don't belong.
Right.
Focusing only on the differences just to justify my current behaviors at the time, right? Justification and deflection. Completely refusing to accept responsibility for my actions, right? Ignorant to all this shit at the time, but looking back, clear as day. And he's black, I'm white. He's 70 to 75, I'm 17. He smokes crack. I successfully do heroin is what I think at the time, right?
Right.
He's homeless. And I live with my mother and my girlfriend. So at the time, I'm thinking, God bless that man. I'm so grateful he found the answer for which he's in search of. And I mean this in my heart. What I can't tell you about that program was my therapist's name, the relapse prevention package they were trying to shove down my throat, those healthy and unhealthy boundaries they're trying to instill in me. Because if I could tell you about those things, that means that I can relate to being one of you people and I want no part. You people are the people I hate the most in the world at the time, which is my father.
Yeah.
So I leave that treatment center and I successfully complete it. And I don't turn 18 in a place like that. So my mind immediately goes to, how fucking dare this old man think that he could predict my future? Again, those people have no idea what they're talking about. They don't understand who. I'm so internally unique. I am not them. Them or my father. You couldn't pay me to be at the time. But then I turned 19, 20, 22, 23, 24, 26, 27, 29, 32, 34, 35, 37, 38 in a jail or a treatment center. And every year I'd sit in whatever cell of a jail I happened to be in or bed of a treatment center I happened to be in and think back to that older gentleman and say, maybe if I just would have listened to him with an open mind and an open heart, I would not continuously create this outcome for myself, meaning that was fully self-induced. So life kind of being lived forward and learned backwards, unbeknownst to me, I started to become accountable for my actions, even while still getting high. I was like starting to say, okay, like I bought this and being responsible for the part that I played and shit. So it worked backwards.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I get all in depth with shit, but.
Yeah, no, I like it. So what was it? It was the 13th time.
Yeah.
Or 13th facility.
Yeah.
That you went to that it clicked.
And there was nothing different from 13
Nothing
to
special.
12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7.
Just you were ready.
Yeah. Timing and alignment.
Timing and alignment.
The shit that they say at facilities is generally regurgitated and recycled. It's a little bit different.
Sure.
You can put a little bit of a spin to it, but it's been things that have been passed down for years and decades. For me, what happened was at 38, I was no longer young anymore. I had been banned from every one of the bars here in town that I liked. True story. Like I couldn't even go out anymore because like I wasn't allowed in. My friends would go and I'd be like, I was no longer had that feeling of being indestructible or indispensable, right? I saw the majority of my friends move on with life and get, families
Sure.
and whatever made them happy, homes, car, whatever it is. And I'm still like stuck on stupid. I'm still sitting alone at a parking lot down here staring at the old house that I lived in with my ex-fiance crying because she moved on and no one will take me. Like legit.
Yeah.
That's where I ended, here, right down the street. Just staring at old house with my bag sitting next to me. Nowhere to go. No one wanted me. Like I was like a stray dog that nobody wanted. Not even exaggerating. And I knew that like it didn't have to be that way. It didn't. The pain had become so great, right? Pain is the only motivating factor in my life that will dictate any form of change. I'm not the kind of guy where you get my attention with like unmanageability. That's a Monday morning cup of tea for me.
Yeah.
The pain has to be so unbearable that I have no other option but to give you my undivided attention. And then I have to act quick because that window of opportunity is generally the same size as like a $10 bill. Right, because I come up on a couple of bucks, I buy a bag of heroin, I ingest the drink or the drug, and then all of a sudden I think that this is just an overreaction. Tomorrow will be different. And I mean that when I say that tomorrow will be different, but then I wake up tomorrow to repeat yesterday's actions, and I'm stuck in Groundhog's Day for like another 20 years.
Right.
And then when I got sober, when I started to acquire the knowledge and information and no longer become ignorant about the disease that I possess, I realized that I was way off the mark. My problem had nothing to do with drugs and alcohol. Nothing. Not one. Actually, the drugs and the alcohol were the exact opposite of my problem. They were the solution to my problem. My problem was my thinking, my attitude, my behavior that always led me back to thinking that a shot of heroin or a glass of wine here at Moss was a great idea.
But was it caused by some kind of trauma? I mean, it was your father, obviously, but were there other things, do you think? Because, you hear that drug addiction or any type of addiction is caused by some internal emotional trauma, or like you head down a path, like there's a gateway drug or something.
Yeah.
But you're saying it was just you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I believe that it was genetically predisposed to my father. I can't bet the bank on that, but I would.
Well, makes sense.
I believe I was kind of cultivated within that world or society where that made sense. Kind of like if drugs are the answer, then what's the question? My question looked like how I was raised in a biker family that allowed me to kind of just, for my, I'll never forget, for my 8th birthday, my father got me a pair of chaps and a little YZ50 motorcycle. Nice. And I'd be in the garage with the bikers as they're like working on their Harleys, and I got these little chaps on with this little YZ50. And then he gave me to go with that a machete that for some reason he insisted I keep in the freezer. Why? I don't know, but that was his mentality. That was my 8-year-old,
Oh my gosh.
While accompanying him to the strip joint to go conduct his business. Mm-hmm. And to me, that seemed like the norm at the time.
It seems like every interaction you had, I say every, but the interactions you're describing with your dad is he was just molding you to be him.
Yeah.
His mindset, his experiences, his day.
Because that was his norm.
Right,
totally.
Right.
Like, why not?
He wasn't really thinking about raising his son.
No.
He was just thinking about like, come here.
Yeah.
Stay with me.
For sure. And then understanding, more about addiction later on in life when I found or was blessed with recovery, the core of our disease, right? The core where it lies is in our selfishness and self-centeredness.
Yeah.
So it's me. And if I have 2 seconds to spare, you, but only if it's going to benefit me.
Got it.
So I was benefiting my father.
Yeah, it sounds just like that.
And then what would happen is my mother, who was like earning an honest day living, would come home and he'd say, "Look, Pat, I did great. He's been with me all day."
Yeah.
Right? Well, doing
I
what?
brought him back alive.
Oh my God.
Totally.
We're not going to talk about what happened,
Yeah.
but he's home safe.
Yeah.
I'll see you later.
Did your mom know what was going on? Like,
Yeah, totally. And obviously, I'm sure not to the extent
Right. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. But love's a crazy thing.
Do you think your dad ever felt like he was doing something wrong when he was doing the drugs and selling the drugs? Did he think that way, or
I don't believe
he just did?
That was his
Yeah.
That was his reality.
Yeah.
So when my mother would come home and that was not her reality, right? She was in this quote unquote normal world, and say, "Rome, what are you doing?" He probably thought that she was out of her mind.
Right.
Like when people would say to me, like, "Dude, why?" One time I was going to get sober by moving out of the country. Right after I had been to treatment multiple times, I was going to literally move to a different country. And when people laughed at my plan, right, because I thought that it was literally across the world, I could go there. They didn't even speak my language. I could go there. I could regroup. I could reassess. I could reevaluate. I could redo my life, right? Because I damn sure don't like the results that I'm receiving here in Westchester or in Baltimore. And when they'd be like, "Dude, that's insane," I'd be like, "You're fucking insane for thinking that my plans," and believe it. Like I'd pass a polygraph for thinking that you're insane for not understanding my plan. Only to find out once I found myself in a place where I was willing to be open-minded and listen to others, that the geographical change will not change the internal malady from which I suffer from, and I will only take me with me.
Wherever you go, there you
are.
Yeah.
So it's like,
you checked into that 13th facility. I'm still kind of fascinated because decades have gone by of you telling yourself and telling others, "I got this. Tomorrow will be different."
Multiple, what was it in the beginning? Ultimatums.
Yeah, multiple ultimatums, right?
So many. I could.
So you've conditioned yourself to fail again and again
and
again. You tell yourself, you're not even listening to yourself at this point. All those years.
Yeah.
You check in. Did you have it? Did you have the epiphany when you were walking toward the building? Day 3.
So it's funny you say that. I was right down the street here at the courthouse.
Yeah.
And I was seeing Michelle Ward. She's largely in part to blame for my journey of sobriety. And she was supposed to violate me. And I showed up in her office, and she said, and this is the day before Memorial Day, and she said, I'm going to give you one more chance. And she was a really nice woman. She really, she didn't speak to me or at me, but with me, right? She made me feel humanized. She didn't just say, what's your discharge plan?
Yeah.
What's your drug of choice?
Check
Why'd you
boxes.
fail the piss test? Like, she really, like, saw me, and that was nice. And because the way I lived for so long, unfortunately, people had to love me from a distance, right? Because if you told me you loved me, I equated that to $10, right? Like, I got you. And I'm going to be able to rip you off. I'm going to manipulate you. I'm going to con you. And you're going to do it. And then I'm going to apologize. And it's going to be a wash, rinse, repeat. So finally got to a point where people just had to love me from a distance. Rightfully so, for the safety of them and me. But Michelle, she couldn't love me from a distance. She was tasked by the state to make sure that I follow rules, or else I go back to jail. And I show up for an appointment, and I'm dirty. And she says, I'm going to give you a chance. And I actually really begged for this chance, and the pain was becoming so overwhelmingly unbearable. And the delusional effect that drugs and alcohol always produced stopped showing up. Right? Like, that was largely in part a big reason why the jig was up. Because no matter how bad my life had gotten to that point before I ingest a line of cocaine, a bag of heroin, a bottle of wine, this delusional effect is produced, which allows me to escape the reality that I have created for myself. So it not only makes, like, being homeless, wandering the streets, manageable, it makes it kind of like desirable, right? It produces this delusional effect that is not real. And now, at 38, no matter how much drugs or alcohol I consume, that effect is no longer being produced. So I'm having that moment of clarity while under the influence and sober. It stopped working. And it's largely in part because the worst thing I ever did for my alcoholism is I started to acquire some knowledge. And it started from that first attempt, from that first man saying, don't turn 18 in a place like this. As much as I thought it was a failure, I'd started to acquire this knowledge from these seeds that were being planted along the way, all unbeknownst to me. And now, 38 years old, everything in my life is shit. Everyone who I care about in my life has moved away. People's lives around me that aren't involved with me are getting better. I'm the only one staying stuck on stupid, sitting in a parking lot alone with my belongings in this bag as I stare at my old home where my ex-fiance literally ran from Westchester and moved into Philly to escape me. And I'm just crying about the days that used to be, right? And I was like, dude, this is like, what the fuck? Like, I'm doing this,
So you finally saw the light.
Yeah. So, okay, I forgot where I was going. Sorry, I zoned out. So that happens. I go see Michelle. Michelle says, I'm going to give you one more chance. And she signs me up for an appointment down here at the outpatient center at the Gaudentia, right across from the Wawa, directly across. And I go there. I have my I'm sitting after I leave her office, right? The courthouse is right here, right behind the courthouse at the top of New Street where it kind of branches out. I'm in that parking lot. Me and my ex lived at that corner house, right next to the church. I'm standing there crying, and I see a buddy of mine who owns a business here in town. And he pulls by and he sees me. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, just make up a lie. And he's like, you hungry? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not hungry at all. But I know that I can, if he takes me to eat, which he will here in town, I can, order a handful of glasses of wine to kind of get away from how I feel right now. Right. So we go to Moss and we sit here outside and I slice back like 6 or 7 glasses of wine. Who the owner of Moss, Joanne, is a dear friend of mine, Joanne and John. There have been nights where Joanne locked me in her office because everyone had kicked me out and she didn't know what to do with me. And, like people really, Westchester came together and tried to help me as a whole so many times. And then we finished that and I have him drop me off at my assessment down here. And I remember going in there and I was so sick. I was so violently ill and withdrawing that it's an outpatient program. And there were clients in there that were getting ready to go to group for the day and they looked just like us now. I did not look like us now. I was in a really bad way. And I remember getting while I was waiting to be seen, I got on my knees. I got on my side in this fetal position and tried to lay like under the chairs. Like I almost wanted to get into the wall just so people couldn't, with my back too, because I didn't want anyone to be seen. And finally they call me and I go into the office and it's this older gentleman named Charles who worked there at the time, and a really nice guy. And he's got me in his office and he's asking me a list of questions, and I can't stand my skin. I can't sit up. I can't lay down. So again, I get into that fetal position on the ground at his feet, almost like a dog. And he's asking me the questions, and he goes, okay, we'll see if we can get you a bed, but I wouldn't hold out on it. It's the holiday weekend. This is Memorial Day. Holiday weekend. And he goes, go outside and wait. And I don't want to be in the waiting room, so I go sit outside on the curb, and next to the curb is a cigarette butt receptacle. And I'm literally just pulling cigarette butt after cigarette butt, chain smoking. And my thought was, because I had someone reach out to me that said they would give me a scholarship to a treatment center in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But the thought of me making it to Philadelphia Airport through security and during a 3-hour flight to get to Fort Lauderdale was the equivalent of like trying to climb Mount Everest with no hands or feet or eyes. Like that overwhelming.
Yeah.
So my thought was, if I don't get this bed, the very best that I can do is outside of the building, there's a row of hedges that go around to kind of separate the building from just a pretty look aesthetically. And I was like, okay, I'll just crawl around in between the hedges and the brick wall, and I'm just going to lay here until something happens. Like that's where I was.
Wow.
Like legit. The fight was over. I literally had no more dog in this fight. I was just physically, mentally, emotionally fucking I couldn't even walk. I couldn't even sit up. And he came out and he said, we got you a bed. And the reason why they got me a bed, because I had been to this program a few times before and I did well. I'd always done well in there. I was, kind of wasn't a problem. And I've done interviews since, and they're like, were you depressed in rehab? And I'm like, no. I was depressed before I got that bed, but the moment they told me a bed was available, it was like I hit the Mega Millions. Where most people would be like, oh, I'm going back to rehab. Yeah. I was like, and at that moment, on my journey into rehab, they picked me up on one of those kind of druggy buggies, those little van deals. And on my way there, every one of those seeds that were planted along my journey just like fucking erupted like they were on cocaine, like poof, shot through like it all made sense. It all aligned. And I was like, I get it. And I'm telling you, I'm coming up on 9 years in May, and my sobriety, for the most part, has been really even keeled. And it's for a few different reasons, but largely in part because of the pain that I was in, which made me become willing to be open-minded, to listen to people who clearly had a way better idea of reality than I did and how to stay sober, because I clearly didn't. And I adhered to what they suggested, and all the information I acquired along the way that I thought were failures that really weren't.
What would happen if he didn't give you that chance?
God only knows. God only knows.
Yeah.
But I always say, thank God God is God and I'm not God, because I would fuck that job up. Straight up. I've seen me do that in some properties that I've bought. One in particular, the very first sober house I bought. I did everything backwards. Meaning the very last thing I acquired in the deal was the actual house. I had bought the furniture. I had taken the photos on the porch while the previous owners were sitting in the living room for the brochures that I was going to make for the business that I was turning it into. I started staffing it. I started accepting clients, and I hadn't even had the property.
Oh my goodness.
And literally when we went to do the walkthrough, they said, we regret to inform you, but the bank's not going to give you the loan. And I had the contractors coming the next day to start. Wow. I had aligned everything. And I'm like, what the fuck? This can't be right. There's no way. And at the midnight hour, the bank said, we're not giving you the loan. I scramble. Of no fault of mine, it was literally a mistake made on the bank's part, but they thought that I was late on a payment, which said, we're not going to give them this loan, which I wasn't, whatever. But it is what it is. But then my real estate agent said, well, I have another lender. Let's try with them. And we go with the other lender. The lender does what lenders do and finagle some things and come back to me with a better loan where it's saving me $1,200 than it was if I went with the first guy. And then as soon as we got the house, some problems arose that pushed us back by 9 months. So if it would have went how I wanted it to go in the beginning, I would have went bankrupt because of the 9 months it put me out and the money that it bled while fixing the problems.
Right.
And right there was one of the biggest learning lessons I had ever had. I'm like, dude, thank God I didn't get what I wanted.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Oh man! All right, I want to reel it back because we're in Westchester, right? So we have to talk about Bam and Jackass, and I know you guys have had a controversial relationship. We don't need to go into all those details. I know on your website or on your YouTube page you talk in depth about your relationship with Bam, so we don't have to go into that if you don't want to. But I'm just wondering, what was it like to kind of get into that world, the Jackass world, and I know you were using at the time, I think off and on, right? Bam did help you too a little bit during that time.
I was always using.
Yeah.
Just different capacities. But yeah, no, that was my introduction. That's how Pennsylvania, Westchester became my home. Because, at that young age, after I met Bucky, I had met Bam. Bucky and I would come to the skate park in Pennsylvania called Sheepskates. And we would go there, and that's where I met Bam. And then we would go back to stay at Bam's parents' house, Bam's house with his parents, because we were like 14 at the time. And then Bam continued to rise in the world of skateboarding, and he decided to pursue, all these different avenues with filmmaking, directing, skateboarding, and really making his life memorable and worth living. And I decided to take the road of pursuing heroin. And so quite the opposite, the juxtaposition night and day.
Right.
But nonetheless, when I was at one of the lowest points of my life, he was doing a tour and with a toy machine, which was a skateboarding company, and they showed up in Baltimore at a skate shop to do a demo, and he asked if they had ever seen me, and left his phone number for the day that I may stop in to have them give it to me. And I stopped in on a day when things were really bad, and I was trying to get money, and they wouldn't give me money, but they gave me his number. And a few days later, I called that number, and it actually was not the number to his house. It was the number to Fairman Skate Shop right here in the corner, around the corner. And I was calling from a payphone, right? This is before cell phones existed. And I had like 50 cents. I'm like homeless at this point. So that 50 cents was like my life. I could not lose that.
Yeah.
And I get through to Fairman's, and they're like, well, Bam, timing and alignment. He was just here, but he's actually eating at Kuma next door. We'll go get him, right?
Wow.
Like if I would have called 20 minutes before or later, I would have missed him. No 50 cents. Probably never would have called again.
Wow.
And they go get him. And literally that night, I was on a Greyhound bus here to Westchester, where he was going to allow me to live with him and be part of Viva La Bam, and which then led way to Jackass. And it was so cool because at that time, I'm a homeless heroin addict in Baltimore. I had burnt all my bridges, like all of them. And all I wanted was to just, I didn't really want to be clean, but I wanted what clean people had, like relationships, friendships, and good times and fun nights. Like I remember being homeless one night in Baltimore in this area called Fells Point, which is similar to like being out here in town. It's a little bar kind of area. People go out, and I remember sleeping on this bench, and this group of girls walked by, and they stopped, and it was like 2:30 in the morning, and they're like, he's too good looking to be on that bench. And I remember hearing that, and I was just like, oh God, it hurt so much. But so when he allowed me to come here, I started to create genuine relationships again that didn't revolve around addiction. And I met all these beautiful people and had so many great times and relationships and parties and frat parties. And I didn't have to quite stop drinking and drugging, which was cool. And he made it very difficult for me to do heroin or any kind of opiates here, because everyone was widely aware that like I was not to be given any kind of opiates, because cocaine was socially acceptable, right, in the scene, and drinking was cool. But when I did opiates, whether it was pills or heroin, then I'd like nod out in mid conversation. Right. I'd steal your shit. I'd wreck your like not very pretty stuff. So nonetheless, it just allowed me to kind of have that new lease on life and create all these amazing friendships still today that I have with all of them, and they're dear friends. And
Seems so loving. Like, you
It
guys,
was.
the videos I see, you're all hugging each other and you're loving on each other. And, like it was
Great group.
really, really nice.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was the best times of my life, because high school was, for me in Baltimore, it was just high school. Like I went and I was already into drugs during that time, so I really never experienced like those really fun things in life. By the time I was 21, most people want to go to the bar to have a legal drink. I was like
You were done.
sleeping on those benches where those
Yeah.
girls are like, he's too good looking
Yeah.
to be homeless.
That's tough.
So I totally skipped like laptops. Like I could pawn them. I never used them. I still, like I missed that whole era of, and then I showed back up, and all of a sudden, kind of like, am thrusted into this crazy world here. It was really fun, but then became kind of like a household name at a point in time.
Right.
So it was a weird gap in my life that
Yeah.
was missed.
Go ahead.
Did was the Jackass money? I'll just put it that way. The world money. Is that where you made your more than skateboarding?
Oh,
You were
yeah.
you were
That's where I made
sponsored?
all of it.
There wasn't
Yeah,
a lot of money in the
totally.
sponsorship.
No.
I know, like Gatorade sponsored you, the youngest ever,
Yeah.
or first ever, I think, for a skateboarder.
Yeah, but it's the first that they started endorsing like extreme athletes.
Got it.
But there was no money to be had then.
Got
in
it.
any of that.
So it all came from
all
the TV show, the
TVs,
movie, yeah.
and that stuff.
Got it.
And then I'd parlay that into like side deals. Because I'm still like an addict. And I remember going on the Howard Stern show, and
Yeah, I remember.
when he was on Sirius, and before I went on, he was. This is like before podcasts, so I think like he was like the Joe Rogan.
Yeah,
of
He's it.
that
Yeah. I
world.
still love him.
Broke the ground.
And I went to like all the people that I knew that owned businesses, and I'm like, look, you give me $1,000, I'll mention your business
Wow.
on air while I'm doing this interview on the Howard Stern
He
show.
probably didn't. Did he
So
take
I
that
go
well,
do
or-
it, and I walk out of the interview with like $8,000.
Yeah.
So I would just parlay side shit like
Smart.
to like my addiction.
Yeah, that's smart. It sounds like your drug abuse simmered during your time up here and doing the show and all that, like, because nobody's giving you opiates or anything like that. But then did it re-blossom once the show was over?
Totally. Yeah. We got to such a weird place. I was supposed to go on a tour with Bam and everybody to Australia. And we're going to go to this tour. He created a band called Fuckface Unstoppable. And
Sounds about right.
a lead singer. And there was like a lot of really fucking really talented musicians in this band. And we were scheduled to go on the tour, and I showed up at his house, and I was high out of my mind. And he immediately was like, "You're not going on the tour. Like, get out." And I had, previous to going on that tour, I was staying back in Baltimore at my mother's house. Like, things were kind of fading out here, and I was starting to burn those bridges here. It lasted way longer than I ever expected. But everything was coming to a head here. I was kicked out of the majority of the bars. My exes had become my exes. They had like, friends were kind of, so I go back to Baltimore, and I'm back at my mother's house, and this is my last chance. I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, all right, I'll do this tour. I'll get back in everyone's good graces. I'll make money. I'll kind of restart and do it right this time. And that did not happen. I get kicked off the tour before we even leave for the tour. And then I'm back in Baltimore at my mother's. And now reality is really setting in. I'm like, dude, this is it. I'm at my mother's house at 38.
Came back around.
Yeah, full circle.
Yeah.
And then one day I go to score some heroin. I get back to my mother's house where I'm staying, and a police officer pulls up, and he was called by my family members, and they served me with a restraining order that I was no longer allowed on my mother's premises. And thank God.
It was requested by your mother.
Yeah, well, no, my mother would never do that. It was my brother.
Oh, your brother. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
because
you.
like they knew that my mother was, ultimately going to love me to death.
Got it. Sure,
Right?
of
Like,
course, as a mom would.
Yeah,
Right,
rightfully
right.
so.
Right.
Thank God that they stepped in. And then timing and alignment. I was due to see Michelle Ward for my visit, and I never wanted to go to jail, so I would always kind of like show up for that stuff. And I came back up, and I begged her, and everyone says the system is like out to get you, and the system is gonna like get you, and the system saved me. I'm one of those rarities, I think.
Yeah.
I don't want to say rarities because it probably happens more than the public is aware, but the system saved me.
Do you think so for like our audience? Because we probably have people watching that are
Yeah.
learning from you right now. Are there like 3 or 4 things, or I know this sounds so systematic, but are there things that you do to stay sober?
I was taught so many valuable things, like that I had to uncover the problem in order to discover the problem if there was ever any hopes to recover from the problem. Right? Like there was so many layers to it, and I had learned that I'm an accessories whore and I'm easily diverted by women, by things, by just whatever, because it allows me to not have to focus on the real problem, which is me. I never want to look at me.
Yeah.
So understanding that, they told me if I stick to the basics, I'll never have to go back to the basics. Right? So I still do the same very rare handful of things today that I did when I was in that 90-day inpatient treatment center. And I wake up every day. The very first thing I do is I make my bed. Right? And this is almost 9 years later. And if you walked into my house 2-3 days in a row, my bed's not made. Like, problems are coming. As simple and as trivial as that may seem, for me, it's not. But I make my bed, and then I immediately get on my knees, and I have a really good relationship with my higher power. I'm not religious, but I'm insanely spiritual. And then I'm very proactive in my recovery. Right? I recognize that I suffer with a disease called alcoholism, not alcoholism, and I can't stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. So I have a sponsor, a guy who kind of guides me and directs me, that I can bounce things off of. I attend 12-step meetings, AA meetings. I have a home group that I go to once a week, every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. And I work with others, with other alcoholics. I sponsor other people. And as you started this out, do for others what someone did for me.
For you, yeah.
And I keep it very simple and very basic, and stick to the basics. And I'm just aware. More importantly, I'm aware of the reality of the situation. Right? The reason why I always got beat so fucking bad by my opponent, meaning addiction or alcoholism, is because I never gave it the time, attention, or respect it deserved. Right? I always underestimated the opponent that I was up against. And then I started surrounding myself with like really intelligent people who truly had my best interest at heart. And they said, don't you fucking know you've been fighting a fixed fight your whole life? You will never win that fight. And the only time that we win this fight is when we admit complete defeat. And the moment I admitted complete defeat was the exact second I secured the ultimate victory. But I didn't understand any of that, because prior to admitting defeat, the way that I lived my life was to fight. To fight was to win. To fight was to survive. To fight was to secure another drink or another drug. To fight was to not be sick. Then I come into recovery, they tell me to fight is to die. To fight is to lose. To fight is to relapse. So I literally had to rewire my brain, but I didn't know how to rewire my brain. What happened was I had a spiritual experience. And the definition of a spiritual experience is simply a psychic change. So that means to me that I today no longer look at things the way I did almost 9 years ago when I sat on the curb pulling cigarette butts out of that receptacle, deciding if I was going to sleep in between the wall and the hedges. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was so simple, I overlooked that for so long.
Yeah. So when you went through this 13th recovery, the detox from heroin, I hear, is just a horrible physical experience, right? For the first 2 days, 3 days. I don't even know.
Sure.
I'm speaking just
Sure.
randomly. But did you go through that multiple times and still relapse?
Yeah.
Over the years.
Totally.
So that's what those recovery centers that you were in, those rehab centers you were in, were to get you through those early stage of detox. Right?
Yeah.
But your Novak's house, is it that same type of facility, or it's once they're through that, we're going to support you?
Yeah, no, it's once you continue some level of care, primarily an inpatient setting.
Yeah.
And you want to continue on your journey in recovery in a safe, structured environment. I've created sober living homes, which is basically a step-down process. You're not in an inpatient setting. You don't receive medications.
Got it.
You have freedom. You can have a car, you have a phone, a laptop. But there's provisions set in place. There's a live-in house manager. You have curfews to attend to, random urinalysis to give, a set amount of meetings to attend during the week.
Right.
Actively working. the goal is to become a productive member
Right.
of society, self-sufficient member
Sure.
of society. And I wasn't trying to recreate the wheel or, cure world hunger. I was just recreating what worked for me. And I went to a 90-day inpatient treatment center. And from there, I went to a sober living house for 1 year. And that's where I learned how to navigate through this weird thing called life.
Yeah.
Somewhat normally.
Yeah.
I learned how to do my wash. I learned how to brush
Right.
my teeth consistently, shower regularly, put my clothes away,
Right.
make my bed, get a job, open my own bank accounts with my name on it, not attached with someone else's. Start paying my own $165 a week in sober living, which then I started paying bi-weekly, and that debit card turned into a pre-secured credit card, and the pre-secured credit card turned into a credit card that today have multiple credit cards with, a couple with no limits. And it's not bragging or boasting. It's just saying that I literally had to be taught how to walk through those weird worlds in order to get what,
It's a transition.
yeah,
A transition back
I had
into.
to be walked and guided
Yeah.
through that, and in an environment that was still holding me accountable to the most important thing, which was my recovery. So I just recreated that in Wilmington, Delaware, and I opened one house with 10 beds, and today I have 6 houses with 65 beds.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you have personally helped people, which I find amazing. Like, I go on your Instagram account and you're giving out, I don't know if that's your personal phone number.
Yeah, I have
but if
2
someone's
phones.
struggling, like, they can reach out to you directly. Like,
Yeah.
it's just, I think, so incredible. And are there people or a story you can tell about someone that you've actually helped?
There's just so many, but there's a funny story, again, with humanity, just the way it has its own way of right-sizing me in the whole thank God, God is God deal. I remember one time I was at the airport with this kid, and we were in Baltimore, and I was flying him to treatment with him. And in hindsight, I thought it was like, dude, this is a slam dunk, easy case. The kid, who knew who I was, he was a big fan, and he reached out to me, and I had spoken with the family, and we'd aligned everything, and I was like, I felt very good about the outcome. I was going to get on a plane with him, I was going to fly him to treatment, and everything was going to be great. And we get to the airport, and it's starting to become reality for him, right? And I started to see a change in his demeanor, a shift. And all of a sudden the flight starts to board, and all of a sudden his eyes light up, and reality set in. He's about to get on a plane and literally go away, and I can't do it. And in my mind, it was as good as done, and we were already there in my mind. I can't, and now I'm like, I have 2 phones. I'm calling family, anything support to get him to encouragement to get on this plane. And I turn around to sit my bag down for a second, and I turn back around. He ran. He's gone. He left the airport, right? He returned back to active addiction. In my mind, I was so angry of that outcome. I felt like I had failed. I felt like I could have done better. I felt like that was not how it should have played out. I was really angry. Cut to 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from him, and he said, I'm so sorry. I was overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, and I couldn't get on that plane and go, but I actually did go to treatment. It just wasn't in a different state. And he said, I'm in treatment now, and I have 2 of my friends that need help. Can you help them? So ultimately, it did not go as I planned. I thought it was a failure. He went to treatment, was in treatment, and called me and told me about 2 friends of his that wanted help, and I was able to help those 2 people successfully get the help they needed too.
Wow. What does that feel like when you can help?
I don't think that much about it because I get so consumed with the day-to-day that
Right.
I really...
You're saving a
When
life.
the day that I think about it is May 25th, which is my anniversary. I always go to that parking lot, and I sit in that parking lot where my friend found me and took me to Moss to have a glass before. And then I go to the Gaudenzia here, and I pop my face in and say hi to let them know that, like, what they're doing is valuable.
Yeah.
And that's the day that I reflect the most on what I've done to this point. But besides that, it's just kind of like...
part of your day.
Yeah. Which is probably
Awesome.
good, because if I did focus and fixate on that, then I'd start thinking that I was the one who created these outcomes, and then like God doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, and I got this, and it's bad when I get this.
Yeah, when you say I got this,
Yeah,
it's not
problems. It's like the bed not made.
It's the bed. That's funny.
But you are a catalyst. I mean, for sure. I mean, so
I'm
That's a
just
good way to
grateful,
put it.
man.
That's a good way to
Yeah.
put it.
Yeah. I'm just merely a messenger, man. You
Yeah.
know, and I'm blessed to be a part of. That's it. It's
Yeah.
that simple.
I do want to talk, like, I love your relationship with your mother. I would love it if, I'm not sure if you do, but if you have any advice for the moms out there who are dealing with their kids who are going
Sure.
through this, if you want to just like talk into the camera and talk to the moms.
I wish, and everyone would wish too, that there was just an answer, right? And I promise you this: if you look at the data, the analytics, the numbers collected from the studies they do all over the world in regards to addiction and recovery, it states that we are fighting an unwinning battle. It does. You look at the numbers, we are fighting an unwinning, we are losing the fight, right? And that's a very unappealing, undesirable topic to want to be addressed or recognized. And who wants to enter that fight if you're looking at the results and we're losing? And that's very true. But ask my mother if we're losing that fight, right? Because I very easily could have been buried in that plot that she bought me years ago. So it's all perspective. But what I know is my experience. And my experience is when things started to get better is when my mother created boundaries, healthy boundaries, right? She no longer chose to love me to death. And she started making me experience some repercussions of my actions as a direct result of addiction, right? I believe if you baby an addict, you'll bury an addict. One of the best things my mother ever did was put me out of her house at 19 years old because I was an IV heroin addict, and she was no longer going to let me live under her roof while consuming heroin. That's my experience. I don't have the answers. I don't profess or pretend to know what to do. I just know what my history looked like that led to this present. And it's such a intricate, delicate dance, if you will, that has to be met on such an individualized basis. You know, it's tedious. But I suggest that you leave them with resources. You create healthy boundaries. Remember that no is a complete sentence. You don't need to elaborate on anything, and make their drinking or drugging as difficult as possible for them.
Wow. I'm a mom, so it's like I feel that so deeply. Thinking about having to say to your kid, you got to go.
You gotta go. That's so hard.
I am not going to deal with this
19-year-old,
anymore.
so
And
hard.
I've had friends who've had to deal with that, and I just can't imagine how hard that was for her.
Sure.
Sorry.
But there's like Al-Anon, there's resources available. You can call me and my team. We do that. So I also, with Novak's house, I then realized I could help more and do better and bigger. And I opened up a treatment center, Redemption Addiction Treatment Center,
Sure.
which is 13 minutes away, ironically, from the houses. 13 was my treatment center. 13's like become my lucky number. My poison has become my medicine in a weird roundabout way, if you will. But I opened an outpatient treatment center Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, and
Where is that located?
Wilmington, Delaware.
In Delaware.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
Wilmington.
Like 38 minutes from here.
Got it.
So we help people there on a daily basis.
Yeah.
We have outpatient settings. We do virtual. We have Zoom. And we have weekly AA meetings in the basement of the facility, Redemption Addiction Treatment Center. So check that out. And if you need help with yourself or a family member, call us, 610-314-6747.
Amazing. Can you do sort of the same thing for those who are struggling with addiction right now? Just a few hints, right to camera, and just say, here's a couple of things I think you can do.
Yeah. If you're out there and you're caught up in addiction or alcoholism, and you've created an outcome that you can't seem to get out of on your own. The best advice I could give for you is to simply reach out and ask for help. It's physically impossible to use the very same brain that thought you into this problematic position to in turn think you out of it. It defies logic. We're here to help. But just know that help is available, and when the day appears and the timing aligns and that window of opportunity appears, call me. We will be here to help you. I assure you that. And we'll get you the help, not that you need, but that you deserve.
Any way we can help you besides the donation to the Venmo account?
My goal is just to help raise money to provide scholarships.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to donate, amazing. If not, I completely understand that too. And if anyone needs help, my number, 610-314-6747. Myself or John will answer that call. One of us do. I can't answer everyone. I have to sleep sometimes and do other things, but myself or John will answer that call, and we will get you the help that you deserve.
Fantastic. We cannot thank you enough for having
Hey,
me.
man, I had a
This
really
has
good
been
time.
Thank you,
today.
Brandon.
very, very
I hope
insightful,
I did you
very
justice here
inspirational.
today.
Yeah.
This was fun.
Great.
We're honored to have you.
Thank you very much, and we will see you all very soon.
Yes.